it is generally accepted that people respect the military and the primacy of training and will go elsewhere, and are generally respectful of the place that we have. The picture you can see in the lower left was taken to illustrate a point, but under the current bylaws, cycling is currently illegal. But if you're on a unicycle, that's okay because it's not a bicycle. It's quite clear. So it was a bit sort of tongue-in-cheek, and yeah, so that's where we are with that. Bylaws review is a spin-off from TAG. It was founded to tackle the bylaw review head-on. It is primarily comprising of people from TAG. We realise that more than just mountain bikers use the land. We have dog walkers, runners, joggers, people out for a walk, families picnicking, butterfly enthusiasts, photographers, you name it. People go there for a good time. And we founded bylaws review with a view to taking a broader view of making sure the bylaws were subject to scrutiny and were fit for purpose, not only from the military's perspective, but from our perspective too. So that's us. That's who we are. The current position, you can see the map on the right-hand side. We've got areas of Caesar's Camp, Long Valley to the north. We've got the Barossa firing ranges. This area here in purple is another area. All of this area here, plus this area to the south around to the south of Borden, all comes under the Aldershot and District Military Bylaws 1976. That in turn is enabled by a the Military Lands Act of 1892, which I believe that's how long it's dating back to. So the bylaws are currently being reviewed and have been being imminently published for consultation for about 10 years. We don't know why there's been delays. The last delay occurred January this year, and we think that's significant with respect to what we found out about the maps. So we'll come back to that. There is a consultation period required by law for 30 days. We believe that's going to be extended to 60 days because we've made it clear that this public access to the lands is very, very important, very popular. And we've been assured by ministers that there will be a 60-day consultation period. On reflection, I'm actually disappointed because I think if we deliver enough objections to the consultation, we could drown them for 30 days. They wouldn't have time to open all the emails, let alone respond to them, because we know that this land is precious and very, very valuable to us. What I will say is we do not expect to be consulted in any way or form. What will happen is that Ministry of Defence and DIO will present the new bylaws as a fait accompli, and it'll be, that's it, there you are. And then we will have an opportunity to write to the Ministry Secretary of State for Defence and raise our objections. But ultimately, we've yet to see a bylaw that's been reviewed, consulted on, not been just pushed through. So we're not expecting any consultation or any consideration to the local residents. It'll be a fait accompli from DIO's perspective. Now, what's important is Section 2 of the bylaws. And Section 2 is the bit that allows us to use the land at all times when it's not in use for military training. This is absolutely priceless and important and of extreme value. And of all the other bylaws, the military bylaws that we've reviewed, and there are over 100 of them, just one other has this provision. So it is rare. And it is, as I said, exceptionally valuable. The key takeaway message is casual recreational access at all times when not in use by the military. It can't be closed for any other event. A civilian event shouldn't close it. It can only be military training. Otherwise, we should have access to the lands and they should be open. We do also recognise the primacy of military training. It's part of TAG's code of conduct to make it very clear that if you see troops training, you are very much expected to go a different way and find another route and avoid them at all times. We do support the military. We think they do a very valuable job. No one wants to disturb them. But equally, if you listen to certain quarters, the lands are busy all the time. They're used 24/7, and it's all dangerous. when in actual fact, you might get a map reading exercise for half a day on one part of the land. It isn't dangerous. It isn't in use all the time. There are extended periods when the lands are empty, and that should mean casual access for us. So what is the value of recreation? Well, there's 8,000 acres of land approximately. It's predominantly lowland heath. It is some of it, or a lot of it, is SSI or SPA, Special Protected Area for the birds. And it is sandy, well-drained soil. This makes it ideal geology for basically for all weather use. DIO are somewhat constrained by just the geology of the lands that makes it so suitable for not only for military training, but also for recreation. It can rain for a week. You can go out for a cycle on the Sunday when it stops raining. You'll get muddy, but it's not like riding on clay, which is impossible. It is a free draining soil that just drops off your bicycle at the end of the ride. It's lovely. The bylaws review team did a survey back in 2020 of the recreational users. Maybe some of you saw it and responded. We expected, well, when we sort of were just about to publish the survey, between us, we expected between somewhere in 500 and 1,000 responses based on our mountain biking survey a few years previously. And after we launched it, we had 1,100 responses in 2 hours, and eventually 11,000 responses in total. It just, went ballistic, I think is the phrase. It was heartwarming to see people responding. And from that, we now know that the lands account for 59,000 hours of recreation a week. Now, I just, never in my wildest thoughts did I think we would see 60,000 hours of recreation on those lands. But that's the kind of volume we're looking at, and we think that could even be the low end of an estimate, because we only can measure those that respond. We couldn't measure everybody. Some of the joy and the beauty of it, I'm sure you'll recognise, is its casual nature. There are no formal routes. There's no definition about where you can and cannot go, particularly generally. They're wild and open. And for me personally, that is their absolute value. They are priceless. The government themselves, in their own documentation, recognise recreation, physical exercise is exceptionally beneficial. And I am quietly confident that the demand on the National Health Service and mental health services in the area are positively impacted by the access to this land and the value and the benefit it offers. It's some place that I've used at dark times of my life to reset my attitude, you could say, or reset my thoughts. And it is a lifesaver. Big contribution to the quality of life in this area, our casual access to those lands. We had a box in the survey that just allowed people to tell us what they thought, just in their own words. And we didn't really expect much from this, but of the 11,000 responses, we had 8,500 comments. I've just chosen 5. I can print them out, throw darts at them, and get positive feedback on every single one of them. It's not just positive feedback about what we get from it, it's also support of the military and the training, the respect for the lands, and the understanding of the preciousness of the wildlife, the value, basically the whole package. We are talking about people that care passionately about this space. And I'm quite convinced, again, anyone here could probably have written any one of these statements. If ever I'm feeling down about dealing with DIO and how frustrating they are, I just open up the report and have a read of 2 or 3 of the comments and think, yep, okay, there's a good reason behind this, we'll carry on. Because it is, to be blunt, inspirational. Now, what we did in the Norfolk County is split the report into the 3 constituencies across the lands. There's the Aldershot and Surrey Heath and North East Hampshire constituencies, and that meant we could then deliver a tailored response and a report directly to each MP to explain what their constituents were telling them. It has proved highly valuable. So loss of access, what have we seen? Since 2018, DIO has degraded or removed access to significant areas in the north of the county. Long Valley, 960 acres, a place called Porridge Pots, 250 or so, and the Ash Ranges complex at 320 acres, which has been closed completely. And it does heavily restrict the use. It is a problem, and we are finding that it's difficult to know exactly why they're doing this, apart from being driven by a fear of litigation. I think for the minimal to zero risk of being sued by a member of the public for personal injury claims. You know, we've had a lot of what I would say information fed back from encounters with DIO staff on the land, and they're all just worried about being sued. Basically, you know, I was told that you can't be here because you might fall down a hole. Well, the hole had a sign. Well, and when you point out, well, it's got a warning sign, it said, well, what if you can't read? Well, it's got a graphic next to it. You know, what are you worried about? You know, the blind? I don't know. You know, it's not, I don't believe it's a rational approach now. I think they're clutching at straws. Case study here is Long Valley, fenced in 2018 at the cost of £250,000. There were political insurances to keep it open when it wasn't in use. Those were ignored by DIO. The danger signs were exposed, they went up, and they stayed up for months and months and months. And it's only by jumping the fence and looking into the lands that we find out no one was there. We audited it for about 9 months, went to the MPs, caused a fuss. DIO then met with us and agreed to open the lands and did nothing. We then had to go back. You know, it's just an ongoing battle to keep it open. We now have ministerial directive from Jeremy Quinn, who is effectively DIO's top political boss, to keep Long Valley open when it's not in use, and it's still not being met in any way or form. For example, February, we realised that the units have to book on and off the lands, and that's the trigger point to tell us exactly how long they're there for. And in February, the gates were locked for 320 hours, but they only used it for 34. Now, that is in no way close to describing as keeping it open when it's not in use. It's just not it's not rational, it's not reasonable. And the period September to January was even worse. We audited that from last year as well. I should say 2020, not 2021. And we wanted to audit March to August, and we did a Freedom of Information request. And DIO now tell us that they no longer record the information. So they're hiding now exactly what's going on by just denying the data exists. We believe it does, and we think they're not telling the truth on that. We'll be going back to them at some point. The loss of access, broader terms, car parks closed, fencing 5 kilometres, single fence with no access, lack of provisions for the less able, barbed wire top deterrent fences, blocking wildlife corridors, long-standing routes that are on the 1888 map closed without consideration. There is no consultation, there is no consideration for the local community. If DIO choose or elect to put a fence in, it just goes in, and then we're on the back foot trying to argue to get a gate or to get it opened. The results are damaged fences because people will reassert their access. We know there's nothing going on in there generally. So the danger signs, this sign here, this flip sign is up. People just no longer believe it because it cries wolf. People do express themselves in their own little ways, vandalizing it. I'm not surprised, to be honest. It's frustrating. There is simply very, very little or zero what I call positive goodwill or good faith engagement from DIO. It is it's just not present. So what's changed around Borden? Well, we noticed that the maps had changed. Now on the left is an Ordnance Survey map from which you can see the little red triangles. You may have seen on the maps managed access. Now, managed access carries no legal definition, but it's a very convenient way to explain that there is something here that you can use, but we manage it. Well, the short answer is they don't. And the shorter answer is they can't really manage it because that's the bylaws are telling us you don't have to. If it's in use, yeah, you stay away, and if it's not, you can use it. You'll notice on the right, this is the latest map here, you can see the range definition of Longmoor here, but Weavers Down has lost its designation from the Ordnance Survey map managed access. And this piqued our interest. And when we look elsewhere as well, we've got this area, there's 2 areas of land east side of the A3. Again, they've lost their designation. We've got the same issue up in the north of the county as well. There's 3 areas that have lost this boundary on the Ordnance Survey map. And we wondered why. We weren't sure, but it did occur earlier this year. So we did a Freedom of Information request against Ordnance Survey, and they came back and confirmed that DIO had requested the removal of the Borden areas from the managed access scope. This is actually their data. They released map information, which is really good because you can see it. And you can see these 3 statements here deleted from OS Maps telling us the 3 areas were requested to be deleted by DIO. And this occurred in February this year, and it was just after the cancelled bylaws review. So we think someone jumped the gun and published the map changes ahead of consultation, and if indeed ahead of publication of the bylaws changes. We don't actually know that. We can't prove that because DIO's Freedom of Information response doesn't match what Ordnance Survey tells us. Of the 2 organisations, I would rather believe Ordnance Survey than DIO. You'll also see the 2 purple areas up here in the north that's had the same treatment. They've been deleted from the maps as well as managed access. So something is going on, something is changing, and we don't know what. We are unlikely to get any positive engagement or indeed anything for like the truth from DIO. I don't believe they would tell us. We do know that the Borden lands to the south will be removed from the Aldershot and District military bylaws, and they will get their own separate bylaws. Now, what that will say and what they will say, we can only guess at this stage. Given the mood music so far, I wouldn't think for 1 minute that it's going to be very positive and hunky-dory and everything's going to carry on. I would anticipate loss of access in some form, or further controls or restrictions to the benefit of DIO, but actually achieving 0 in reality. So how can you help? Well, the short answer is keep your eyes and ears peeled. If you hear anything, tell us. But if you could write to your MP, explain the value of the lands, ask them to seek answers. Why has the access to the area, managed access notifications on the Ordnance Survey maps been removed? And do make it clear that any future bylaw must preserve and protect casual access. It's not just about preserving the access. We've got it now. We've also seen DIO just wade in and build fences without consideration. So we must have protection as well as maintaining access. Basically what we need is DIO's hands tied so that they can't just decide to spend £250,000 of our money and build a fence that doesn't really serve any purpose that we can see. Do also please reassure politicians that we do respect the military. We are on their side. We do not believe for one moment the army is the problem. It is DIO, which is a branch of the civil service. If you want to get involved and help us, we are open to any and all suggestions. We are underrepresented in the south of the county. We do recognise that there's land down there, but we can't cover everything. So if there is local representation, that'd be good. Anything that you can do to help, social media engagement, political lobbying. There is the issue with Ash Ranges, which has seen 320 acres just removed from access permanently. The reasons given, right, started off with, well, it's COVID's fault. Okay, fine. Then it became, well, it's vandalism. So you're blaming the locals. And then it becomes, no, it's health and safety. There's too many risks. And none of the risks are really that big. Most of them are mitigated, and most of the risks are not really next to where anyone walks or rides their bicycle. So, Ash has a canal running through it, but nobody's rushing to close the canal towpath in case anyone falls in the canal. It's about balanced risk and measured risk. And DIO's they've made DIO have made it clear that their appetite for risk has changed. Well, that isn't good enough. That doesn't meet the basic standards in public life. You have to remain objective and open and transparent, and we're getting none of that from DIO, I'm afraid. We do have 5 parliamentary ombudsman complaints proceeding. We don't know how they're going to pan out. We hope that all of them will land and cause a reflection and some changes to their behaviour. If they don't, then we've got another 55 potential complaints waiting. We've been tracking their statements, validating and verifying them, and we now have 60 potential complaints. 5 we're progressing, so it's a question of time, we think. If there is anyone with legal standing or anyone knows a friend, Ash Ranges Protest Group have raised a small amount of funding for some legal advice. It may end up going to judicial review, but there is a limited amount of money, and I stress limited, for what I could call some very considered legal opinion. If you happen to be a barrister or have taken silk, then we'd be delighted to hear from you. It would not necessarily be pro bono, but don't expect to retire on the back of it. So that's things perhaps that can be helped. We can do to help. So in summary, we have a very hostile attitude, approach, and environment towards casual recreation on the military lands. Even when they're not in use, they become locked off and closed. We know the bylaws are being changed and reviewed, and they will be published. Consultation will be published with all of the background, with all of the negative aspects of how DIO are approaching and dealing and managing access and effectively sidelining and ignoring the community. We do not expect a positive outcome for this. OS maps have already changed. We don't know why. We haven't been able to establish why, but they have definitely changed. Ordnance Survey have confirmed it's DIO requesting it. And we will continue to keep pressing for political accountability, because there is a significant problem when a group of civil servants are permitted to ignore a ministerial directive and proceed as if nothing's changed. And this is what we have. And I must admit, when I took over the chair of TAG, I thought, just looking after cyclists and making sure that we had some access would be good. We're now into the depths of how our democracy functions and who's accountable, and it's gone a bit beyond what I thought it would be, but it's necessary nevertheless. And the challenge for us is to make sure that all the bylaws must preserve this casual access, but crucially, it's protected. Without that protection, the status quo will continue. And I think if, the current rate, what have we lost in the last 3 years? We've lost 1,500 acres or so, in less than 10 years, it could all be gone. No problem, if that's what DIO seek. There are some useful links. There's our websites, the Ash Ranges Protest Group, Trail Action Group, and the Bylaws Review Group team there as well. So hopefully that's given you a flavour about where we're at. Thank you very much. Hopefully it was useful. And I guess we can open the floor to questions if there are any.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, that was really, really quite enlightening and quite frightening at the same time, really, which is good. I think it's really interesting thoughts there. Just before we take questions generally, I'm assuming that the same sort of thing is happening in other parts of the country. That we've not been singled out for some reason.
Well, we have been singled out because we're special.
Right.
It's only us that's got Section 2. Catterick is the other place. Yeah. Section 2 is the one thing I think DIO would like to see the back of. I think Section 2 is given lip service, to be honest. I think they treat it as something to be, I don't know what they do. I won't put words in their mouth, but the attitude feels and gives us the belief that it's just, to be treated with contempt, or to be ignored at best. It's Section 2 that is priceless and valuable, and Section 2 that we must really safeguard. So, yeah, we are being singled out, but for good reasons.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. Right, I'm going to take the questions, the hands in the order that I've seen them come up. If anyone else wants to ask a question, please use the buttons at the bottom of the screen to raise your hand, and I'll come to you. So we'll start with Will Blackett. Will, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Hi there. First, Keith and Simon, thank you very much. I'm a Gretham resident. I live a stone's throw from Walmer Pond and that area. We very much enjoy casual access, exactly as you've described. So the thought of losing access to that is it will completely change the way we view our own home. One of the things we deal with in Gretham is noise, and it's always been the case that very, very loud explosions through the weekend and late at night, and all the military training noise is just something that you live with. And it's become almost a precedent that you don't mind, because when they're not doing it, you get to go and access the land.
There is a quid pro quo, as they say. Yes,
exactly. Quid pro quo. So my question really is: have we at any point used that as an angle for an argument? Is this something that we should be? You know, they're worried about litigation. They're worried about complaints from a health and safety perspective. Well, imagine the raft of complaints, noise complaints, severely restricting the hours in which they can train. Yeah. If the quid pro quo wasn't there, I don't know whether that's a valuable argument or not. It's just something I've always thought sitting here.
I think it's not something we've considered really, because we just, like you, we probably just accept it. But having said that, it's part of the sort of being good neighbours approach. You make the noise, but when you're not there, we can walk across it. That to me is a perfectly valid and balanced deal. I actually don't mind hearing the army trainer. In fact, I welcome it, because it shows they're using it, and that's a positive thing, I think. Have we pushed that line? No. But I would encourage you to make that absolutely clear, if you can, to the local MP. And I think it's worth reiterating. We live here. We accept the disruption in exchange for access, casual access. When they're not there, and that's it. Simple as that. Yeah. So it's a very good point. Yeah.
I will I will use your list of how you can help as a checklist, and I'll write a letter this week, and I will include those points. But thanks again. It's really good. It's really heartening to know that a group such as this exists and is fighting the case. So we'll do what we can to support.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a really good point, Will. And I think certainly for all of us who live locally, we're all very familiar with being woken in the dead of night by the chop of a Chinook coming in to
yes,
to make use of the ranges. So I think we can. I think you're quite right to raise that. Well, I think something we should be raising. Next person I can see is Margaret. Margaret, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
It's not so much a question, Keith, as what I hope is some helpful observations. First, I was struck by what was said about blocking wildlife corridors. We're talking about internationally protected areas here, and therefore that is something which the military ought to be respecting. And I think that's something that ought to be emphasised. But I think if I can go more parochial than that, the southern area, the Walmer and Longmoor area, which are in the South Downs National Park. And the purposes of the National Park are to conserve and enhance wildlife, cultural heritage, natural beauty of the area, and to promote the understanding and enjoyment of the area. And those purposes, under Section 62 of the 1994 Act, all ministers of the Crown are required to have regard to. So this is an extra thing that we can put in down here, which is not available except in northern areas.
Very good point.
And that's something that ought to be put forward very clearly, not only to our local MPs, but to the ministers of the Crown who are bound by that, and also to the South Downs National Park Authority, who I believe are going to have a meeting with the military over this, but they need to emphasise very clearly that point. They have on the board, I know, barristers, planning barristers, who could very ably make the case. And also, I think it's very important that we as a parish write to the National Park Authority saying how important it is that the military have regard to their responsibilities towards the National Park, and copy that to all the local members of the National Park Authority so that it's absolutely clear that we are taking this seriously. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think the first step that we should be doing is upping the ante and lobbying for national park status around here, because straight away it sounds like there is a very structured potential legal protection that could be really helpful to you in the south. I hope it is, and please do let me know how it goes. With respect to the wildlife, I think, for speaking personally, if I hear a nightjar or see an adder, it makes my bike ride. It's just one of those special moments. Even if I see the deer or a green woodpecker, whatever, it brings it alive, and it's for us, it's part of the deal, and it's part of what's special. There may be some people that think, well, if we just open it up for all access, well, that's what we have now, and things are doing very well. People respect this place. They understand its value, and if they don't, then it's down to us to educate. Now, one thing we did offer DIO was, instead of being the campaigning group that we are to keep the DIO in check, is to actually start delivering education, and that offer, like other offers, has just been ignored, sadly. So yes, it's regrettable, but there you go. Okay, well, thank you.
Super. Thanks, Margaret. We really appreciate your input on that, and yeah, I think that's given us some useful pointers. Andrew Tolverwell, do you want to unmute and?
Hi, yes, it's not Andrew Coverwell. I'm just using his computer.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes, so I live in Liss, and I'm actually just retired as a consultant psychiatrist, and I'm passionate about using the ranges on a personal basis. And I would agree, looking at the comments from the survey, that we should really be highlighting the health issue. And I'm not clear whether you've done that via contacting local acute trusts, mental health trusts, community PCNs.
Yeah, it's a really good point you raised, and this comes back to we are a small team. We try and cover the important things, but it's even having time to sit down and think about that kind of information. Who do we approach? Yeah, I mean,
so I was a consultant for this area when the army were pulling out of Borden. I was a consultant in old age psychiatry in the Petersfield area at that point, and there was definitely some discussions at that time as part of the Borden army redo about the Borden area had to have access to the land, because East Hants actually got the worst health generally in the whole of Hampshire.
Oh wow, yeah.
So I'm sure there'd be some scope to be asking the sort of local GPs, sort of primary care networks now, and the local trusts to get involved as well, because we know that the mental health services in particular are overwhelmed at the best of times, let alone after COVID.
Yes. No, that's.
So having just retired, I have got some time on my hands, and I have got some. I have got some sort of thoughts as to how we could probably do that, and I'd be willing to help.
All right. Lizzie's got my email address.
Okay.
Would you mind contacting Lizzie, and I'll do the same, and just I think we should have a longer chat, because I think there's something here.
I think there's health. I think we have to concentrate on health at the minute, because it can't not concentrate on that at the best of times, but particularly after COVID.
Yes. No, thank you very much. That's really good. Yes. Okay. Lizzie, if you're listening, I think you should be listening. If you could just make a note of that, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, and then we've got Ron.
Thank you, Keith. I've got an observation first. which is a bit in support of Margaret's point, and perhaps the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust could also be brought on side. They already manage part of the land for wildlife, so any support from them, I'm sure, would be supportive of whatever view the national park took. The other thing really is a question, and this is more from my role as a member of the Historical Society. And there was a mention in Simon's presentation about the 1892 Military Lands Act. Perhaps Simon could advise what does he understand about that act?
Okay.
Is it that made it military land, and does it definitely belong to the military, regardless of what other views anybody else might have?
Okay, yeah, good question. I think with regards to the land in the north, I'm very confident it is owned by the Secretary of State, and it was acquired in various stages from 1854 onwards. So the lands have been open since 1854, effectively. That was done under what's called an award, where an award was given and people were compensated, and the land then taken over by the military. Obviously, it was empty, open, common land at the time, or not necessarily common land, but open land. No good for farming. You know, the geology lends itself to uses other than farming, such as military training and outdoor recreation. So that's how it's ended up the way it is. The 1892 Act, I think it's section 14.1 or 14.2, I can't remember now, one of those two, which grants the Secretary of State the power to make bylaws, which obviously Aldershot is one of them. And in there, it does give provisions about what those bylaws should do and how those bylaws should function. And one of the points the bylaws does make is that it does grant the Secretary of State the power to close the land for safety. But we've got section 2 that says it's open. So, you know, if DIO are trying to close things on the grounds of safety, this is where we need a barrister or a QC, really, is to then see if section 2 is so strong and so powerful that it overrides any provision that may be there, and there isn't a separate provision, may be lurking in section 2 that permits DIO to close the land at any time they like. We don't think there is. We think section 2, use of lands by the public, you know, it's quite clear about what its intention is a strong provision and intended to keep the lands open, does not permit fencing unless there is a 24/7 presence of military. It'd have to be so persistent, the presence of military, then they can fence it. Up until then, we don't believe it can. And this is what the Ash Ranges people believe, you know, that the reasons, the excuses given by DIO for closing Ash Ranges range from COVID, which was just wrong. They've said that, to vandalism, which has been negated because in 2009, local residents were working in partnership with Ministry of Defence Police. And we got a letter from them in 2009 thanking them for their efforts in reducing vandalism. And that stopped when the Ministry of Defence Police closed in Aldershot. And now it's safety. Well, what if it isn't safety? What if safety isn't a good enough reason? It has to be military training. And then in that case, the whole argument and reasoning for closing anywhere could be directly questioned. That is what we really need from a barrister or a QC.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks, Ron. And now I've got somebody who's on my list, only as 500. So I have no idea what your name is. I can't make out the picture clearly enough. But please do unmute and ask your question.
Yes, I'm Trevor Charles. Sorry for my designation. It's from other Zoom meetings. And thanks so much to Simon for fantastic work. I'd just like to comment, as I grew up in Liss, and the Ranges was a key playground for my family. From the early 1950s, we were playing there as young kids. Now, to my memory then, and I can check it with others, is that the Ranges were extensively used by the military at that time. There was the train going through it, and it was the Royal Engineers, one of the main places, if not their headquarters. There were tanks all over it. In fact, the whole of the area is scored with quite substantial roads, which were used by tanks in the old days. So I think we would find the use was substantially more by the military in previous days. And I don't know whether, I guess they won't access records for you of that. But I think the use now is a lot less than it used to be. And of course, the issue of safety wasn't ever raised then. And I think it's much less now.
I think all respect to the military, because they do a good job of, you know, managing risk amongst themselves and risk to others. You know, it's not necessarily the risk that is perceived by others to exist. With regard to how much is in use, that we were advised in 2014 by DIO that the land was about to become busier because troops were returning from Germany and Afghanistan. And we were reliably informed that there would be armoured vehicles running around Long Valley 24/7, and it was all going to get very busy, and the lands were going to go back to, as you say, what I remember from my childhood, where we had airborne forces in Aldershot. You'd listen to them training every night, firing, and it was very, very busy by current standards. And then at some point, the decision to move troops back from Germany didn't happen. They stayed there, but they still built a fence, you know. And it's almost like they just don't want people there. I think that's their guiding mantra, is they do not want civilians on the land. If they could find a way to get us off and keep us off, even if it wasn't in use, I think they'd do it. So I would agree with you. I think there are some risks. I think they're well mitigated. I think the levels of training are generally low. You know, there's times you can go up Caesar's Camp. You know, I cycle typically somewhere between 50 and 100 kilometers a week on the lands. If I see troops once every 400 kilometers, that's about right. So once a month.
Thank
you. Yes, I just read your comment, Phil, and yeah, I think that is a very good idea. With a couple of prominent people locally who we might well be able to get involved with this. Paddy, you want to unmute and ask the question?
Okay. It's Kim. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, thank you. In keeping with many of the residents that are present and have commented tonight, I mean, we've lived here for 30 years now, and likewise have used the ranges in a variety of ways: horse riding, cycling, walking. Our children have grown up enjoying it and using it, and we sincerely hope our grandchildren will too. We have noticed a decrease in heavy use of the military. I mean, there are often cadets and troops and exercises out during the daytime. But certainly we haven't had to contend with the tanks and things that we used to. So I have a general question, if anyone is aware of further withdrawal from the military, you know, since the Borden barracks have been given up, and, you know, the development in Borden. Are we aware, and the future film studio up at Longmoor, are we aware that there might be further withdrawal and therefore a continued decrease in activity on the Longmoor enclosure? That was a general question, if anyone has information on that. And also, Margaret, just going back to your biodiversity comments, that I wrote to Damien Hines as encouraged a week or so ago, and he copied me in with a reply from Jeremy Quinn back in 2020, Minister of State for Defence Procurement, who did reassure that it was the intention to keep public access. He said the MOD has no intention of preventing the public accessing the defence estates when it is not being used for military training. He also chose to highlight a particular paragraph about the environmental issues. The MOD is committed to the protection of designated sites on the defence estate. Defence infrastructure organisation ecologists are responsible for identifying designated sites and other important features on the estate, and will provide expert advice during the bylaw review process. A summary of environmental issues and the proposed protection measures will be included in the bylaw's consultation document. So it's clearly very much on their radar that the protection of biodiversity is an important part of that bylaw's review. And I just wondered if they're working with Natural England or indeed any local organisations that are part of the fabric of the South Downs National Park and those environmental issues that include Longmoor.
We're not aware of any withdrawal of troops. That's the first point. It's not something we've heard rumour of or picked up on. We do have one or two contacts in the military that discreetly help us. They haven't said anything. I think if that kind of change was going to occur, it would have been picked up on. With regard to the wildlife, there was, back in December last year, we got a hint of what the bylaws were going to say from a set of minutes. And that was to include two designations of areas. One was to be restricted access, and the other one was controlled access. Now, don't quote me on that exactly, but there were two designations. One was to basically close off areas to anyone except people that DIO said could go in, and the other was to allow controlled access to areas where people were more casual on a more casual basis. One of the reasons they gave for protecting the area was the sensitivity of the lands, and I believe that they were intending to use, and I'm going to use the word carefully, but I will use it, use the wildlife as an excuse to restrict access to the general public at all times. So the military would be able to go in there and do the training, but then it'd be closed, and we would not be permitted. Now, we know that particular consultation was due to start in January, and it never happened. And we believe it didn't happen because there was concerns were raised by local residents up here in the north of the county at that time on that basis. So yes, I hear what you say about protection of wildlife. Yes, Ministry of Defence do work with wildlife people. They are, I'm sure, very keen to get a very wildlife-centric view about how everything must be protected and prevent humans at all going in there, because they, humans and casual access to ruin everything, when in actual fact we know they don't. So on the last point, I hear what you say about Jeremy Quinn and his very nice letter. Unfortunately, he can talk the talk, but DIO do not walk the walk. And as a result, although they're saying there's no intention to restrict access, that's exactly what has happened, and more than once. We are seeing a pattern of behaviour here that does not match, I'm afraid, Mr. Quinn's written intentions. So I'm afraid it doesn't give me any confidence to suggest that DIO won't just do whatever they want and disregard Mr. Quinn, because that's exactly what they've done with Long Valley. Sorry to be so negative, but it's a bit of a reality. I have read a lot of very kind words from Mr. Quinn about how, yes, we will preserve access and we've got no intention of closing it. And then you're next out on a bicycle ride and there's a fence going in, and you think, your words don't match the reality. There's massive gap between the two, and I no longer believe them. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. I'm sorry it's so negative. I really, really wish it was more positive, but the track record is of saying one thing and doing another is very, very strong.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Simon. And now we have Alex. Alex, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi there. Sorry you can't see me. The camera's not working very well. It's actually Tom. I'm here using my wife Alex's laptop, and she's here as well. Just a quick observation. So just sort of looking at the OS map myself, and we live in Liss Forest, and we're particularly big users of the Weaver's Down or the sort of Longmoor range. And I noticed that it seems to also, as well as having the managed access designation, have designation as it appears as common land. And I wonder whether on the new revision that's been removed. I couldn't quite see on the slide, so it was a little bit small. But I was just wondering if you know whether that's been removed.
The short answer is I don't. The longer answer is that I know common land law is very, very complex, and as I don't believe we have any in the north of the county. I think all the land was acquired, and it's no longer common law, common ground. Then it's not something we've really looked at. If you've got any evidence that suggests any of the military land remains common land, then there is actually a provision in the bylaw that says there's nothing in the bylaw that takes away the rights of commoners. So the bylaw cannot trump common rights. I wish we did have common land. It would have made a whole thing a lot easier, but unfortunately, I'm not sure it is. Like I say, I'm willing to stand corrected, but and if it is there, great. It could change things.
Yeah.
But look carefully at it.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure myself, but just observing that and then looking at the other managed access and danger areas, things like that, they don't appear to have that common land designation as per the key in the OS map. I'm not 100%, but might be worth checking.
Okay. Yeah, it's worth looking. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, we just got a point on the chat from Shelly, who says, was there anything in Borden's ecotown status that we can use? As I'm sure access to land was part of that. If land's closed, we will all be driving to Alice Holt or Dewey Country Park, which isn't very good for the environment. I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah, very good.
I do know that the number of proposed houses in Borden has had to be reduced because there isn't enough suitable alternative natural green space to be used to make up for the land that's been taken for houses, and that's part of the reason why people within East Hampshire will be aware of the the furore over the moment over the potential of the Chawton Park Farm development outside Alton. I'm not going to get into that one tonight, otherwise we will be here for forever and a day. But it's I think you make a very good point there, Shelly, that yeah, at the end of the day, if people want recreational space and they can't find it in one place, they don't go to another. And it does seem a bit farcical if we are actually encouraging people to get in their car and drive further to get to that recreational space. So yeah, I think that is an argument which is worth us pursuing a little further. I don't actually have any more hands up at the moment, so if anyone has a burning question, now's the moment to raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to thank. Oh, we do, Paddy.
More, yeah.
You're on mute at the moment, Paddy.
Mute. There we go. Hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm also a mountain biker, and I ride over many of the ranges that you talk about and have done for nearly as long as you. And they're different, aren't they? For instance, if you ride over Hankley Common, that has bridle paths over it.
It does. Different set of bylaws as well.
and Hankley Common isn't fenced, and Longmoor wasn't fenced until recently, when it was fenced to keep cows in. Now it's fenced, and since it's been fenced to keep cows in, it's now locked up. And it's started to be locked up this year and during COVID for the first time, you know, I can remember in 30 years. Even with military operations over there, they wouldn't lock it up, and now it's locked up. So I'm wondering, and I understand that Aldershot Common's also been fenced for keeping of cows as well.
Yeah, we don't object to grazing because it helps keep the lands special the way they are. You know, if you don't graze the land, it reverts quickly back to scrub and then eventually forest. So the principle of fencing for grazing, you know, single strand or very 3-strand barbed wire, is fine. No objection at all on that. The deterrent fences and the lock gates, when it's not in use, it sounds like Longmoor Ranges has become another area where it's just become a no-go.
Well,
because they don't want to unlock the gates, or I'm not sure.
It's different, just as it is in Hankley. It's different. The two areas of Longmoor. The chap that spoke earlier that lives in Gretton, that lives near the Woolmer Pond. That section of Longmoor has a circumference road around it. The inner part of it is locked up and flagged because there's live firing ranges on it, so you wouldn't want to. But when the flags aren't up, you have access onto that, and when the flags are up, you would want to.
Okay, yeah. So if it's a firing range and it's under a red flag, you don't want to be there. Yes.
No. But the area closest to Liss, which is a Longmoor range, doesn't have such firing ranges and is very likely used by the military. As my wife mentioned, it's mainly by cadets running around, but it's also used a lot recreationally for organised events like big mudder or orienteering, motocross, enduro, even legs of the national rally go in there. And even when those are on, in the past, the ranges haven't been locked. We've been able to go in, and you just keep clear. So I'm just wondering where this locking of the ranges has come from, because it's never happened in the past.
I think again it comes down to in their own words, their appetite for risk. What the grounding of that is, I don't know. We've never been able to get a rational or reasonable explanation out of it. I don't believe it's evidence-based, and as such, I think it falls quite quickly on the test of meeting standards in public life, one of which is objectivity, which would require evidence as opposed to we don't like something. So, if they are locking an area and it isn't in use, then the bylaws, the Aldershot bylaws, should really make sure that that area is available.
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point, Paddy, and I think as well, you know, I mean, we know that a few weekends ago, the ranges were locked out of use because the Army Motorcycle Club was actually having a motocross event. Now, I suppose the Army would argue that's Army activity, but at the same time, it's not quite what's intended within the Act.
It's absolutely not Army activity, because I looked at it and it was run under what's called an ACU permit, Auto Cycle Union permit. So it was a civilian event. And if they're closing the lands for civilian events, then that is really, really not on. We've had that trouble here with Aldershot, and they should have learnt by the Aldershot experience where it does cause problems. We don't want to stop anyone racing. I used to ride competitively too, but at the same time, public access should not be a matter of DIO at that point. It's not down to them; it's down to the organizer. That's my view.
And we have a question on the chat from Phil, who's saying, is increased risk from terrorism being used as justification?
I've lived through the threat of terrorism my entire life. I don't believe it's any more or less now than it ever has been. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you on
Yeah.
that, Simon. Right, unless anyone has any last minute questions, then I'm going to say a very big thank you to Simon for taking the time to give us a presentation. I for one, have found it really, really useful.
Thank you.
Somebody's made the point in the chat about, is it one-sided? And we've not heard from the DIO, and of course that's true.
Yep.
I think with my parish councillor hat on, what I'm going to say on that is I'll write to the DIO and ask them if they wish to present to the parish council, and if they do, then we'll give them every opportunity to do that, and I'm sure Simon would.
I would love to attend. Please keep me in the loop. Yes.
I'd rather say I wouldn't lay bets on this getting any positive response from them, but I think in the interest of being fair, we should make that offer to them and see what happens.
Yeah, I would encourage it. Yeah.
And other than that, is to say thank you, Simon, for the presentation. Thank you to everyone who's taken part this evening. We will be making the recording available on the Parish Council website. We have issues this week with COVID and with annual leave, so it will probably be next week before it appears on the Parish Council website, but it will be there. And in the meantime, please do tell people about what's happening, because I think the more people that we can get who write to Damien Hines and express their view for or against, some people may be in favour of what DIO are proposing, then that's really important that you do so, because we do know with MPs, as indeed with all politicians, and I'll put my politician's hat on here for a moment, we do respond to noise from the public, and so it's important to that we do that. And certainly I will be making sure that, Lizzie, can we put this onto the agenda for next, or ask Sarah to put on the agenda for the next parish council meeting, that we do seek a parish council view on?
Absolutely.
On this.